Hey folks, my name is Mo and I'm the co-founder of Netflare. Netflare is an all-in-one DevOps platform helping you monitor your digital infrastructure, and when incidents happen, we help you bring it to a close. In this video, we're going to be demoing how to set up an API Pulse. Pulse is a web monitoring tool that periodically checks on your web service, and if it's down, we alert you so that you can mobilize support to get it resolved. Before we jump into it, let's take a look at the API we're going to be testing against. Here I have a public API that provides me statistics on data from the USA. In my case, I would like to get the statistics on the population size for the nation. If I was to send this request, I can see that the data has arrived, and I can see that the data has given me for 2020, the population was 326 million. Now what we're going to be doing is taking this public API and we're going to be putting it against Pulse. And what Pulse will do is that it will ping it every 10 minutes, and if that call was to fail, then we will be alerted so that I can jump on the issue and start working towards a fix. Now back to Netflare, I can add my Pulse by going through the navbar, selecting Pulse, and then hitting Create a New Pulse. From here, I'm going to be guided through a wizard that will help me set up my Pulse. The first thing I get asked is to give a name to this Pulse so that it's identifiable in the future. I'm going to call it US Population Statistics. Then we need to assign it to a team. And then from here we'll ask what type of Pulse is this? We support two types. We support website, where we will render the page using a headless browser and then take a screenshot to ensure that the page looked appropriately. Or we can use an API endpoint, which we can then hit and then check to see the output. And for this demo, we're going to be selecting API. Next up, I would like to put in the endpoint settings of my API. The first question we get asked is the method type, and in my case, it's going to be a GET. Next up, I have to put in the URL, and then from here, I could put in any header or body that I can then include into the API. But for this demo, I don't need to include any of that. My last option in the wizard is to provide the error rules. This is where we set up the condition of what the output should look like for the ping to be considered a success. The first output that we can check against is the return code. By default, it's set up to be any 400 or 500 return codes. The X is a wildcard. Then we're given an option to also check on the body output validation. We have a few options that you can set up here. The default option is to have no body validation, but we could also have string absolute matching, where you give us a string and we will check that the output body must match the string for the ping to be considered a success. Next up is JSON schema validation. This is an open source declarative language that allows you to validate that the JSON meets a certain criteria. But to keep this demo light, I'm just going to select none. From here, I can create my Pulse. Let's hit the create button. There we go. Our Pulse is now created. It will ping the endpoint every 10 minutes and inform us if there's any problem connecting to the server. We can follow up with the history by going to the history tab, and from here I can see that a ping has happened already at 6:20, and that ping is considered to be a success. Now this is the happy path where the return outputs are considered to be a success. But what I would like to demo for you is what happens when Pulse detects a failure and automatically takes action to let you know about it. And the way that I'm going to do that is by artificially creating a failure. Now we know that these pings are currently returning a 200 return code. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go into the configuration and I'm going to say if you receive 200, then we're going to consider that to be a failure. There we go. So now I've submitted that. It's going to, in a few seconds, Pulse will do a ping. And as that return comes out to be 200, it will consider it to be a failure. We'll jump into the video where that happens. There we go. We see that at 6:21, there was a ping, and that ping was considered to be a failure. And the reason why it failed is because we received a 200 return code, which we have defined that we consider that to be a failure. Now, one failure won't automatically trigger Pulse to take action because we want to protect you from false positive. And so what we do is that we require consecutive failures before we take action. And the way you can configure that is you can go into the configuration, and inside of the toggle advanced settings at the very bottom, there is that status settings. And what we have by default defined is that we require 2 failures for the system to go into warning and 5 failures for it to go into alert. We've also enabled rapid retry, and what that does is that when it detects a failure, it will increase the frequency in which it pings the server. And so we'll go from pinging every 10 minutes to pinging every 1 minute. Now, because we have received a failure, we should see another ping at 6:22, where we will see another ping has happened, and that will be also a failure. And there we go. We see now that another ping has happened at 6:22, and that also failed because we received 200. And we can now also see that the system has went into a warning state. Now, the action that the system takes when it goes into a warning is totally configurable by you. But by default, what the system will do is it will automatically create a ticket, and that ticket will be put into a priority 2. So over here we can see a new ticket has been created, and right now it is in priority 2. And what we've also configured is that when the system goes into alert state, which is 5 consecutive failures, then we're going to escalate the priority to be a priority 1. We'll jump into the video where 5 pings of failures have occurred and show you that the priority has changed into a P1. There we go. So now we have 5 consecutive failures. It started at 6:21, and then again at 6:22, 6:23, 6:24, and finally at 6:25. And when we hit the 5th one, the system has now put the status of the pulse into alert. We can check up on it by going into the ticket, and over here, that same ticket that we were looking at before, now it has changed into a priority 1 ticket. From here, because it changed into priority 1 ticket, a notification was sent out to let the assigned person know about it so that they can start looking into the issue. Now, I would like to repeat that the action that Pulse takes is totally configurable by you. You get to define the action that it takes. The way you do that is you go into Alarm Integration, go View Alarm, and then from here, you could define that action. We have multiple actions that you can do. You can create a ticket, close a ticket, comment on a ticket, start a one-book execution, or send out a notification. That wraps it up for our video today. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.